you know? So it's like Harvard, Berkeley, UC Berkeley, UCSD, and MIT and UCSF were the two top schools in molecular biology at the time, and actually UCSF is still pumping out Nobel Prizes. But he chose to go to UCSF.
That's a funny one.
he chose. I know it's like a production. Anyway, he chose to go to UCSF, and basically he was given a full ride scholarship with a stipend. So they gave him spending money, like they paid him to go to school.
Wow.
And he also received an NSF fellowship, which is the National Science Foundation Fellowship Scholarship as well. So when I asked Rob to check out the science to see if what Nu Skin's saying, and this was pre-Agelop, right, was true, he interviewed Joe Chang, Helen Nax, who's in charge of Nu Skin Science, and Mark Bartlett, who's in charge of Pharmanex Science, and in addition to that, did his own research, looking at clinical studies and other papers, and basically came back with the green light and said not only is their science sound, what they're doing is real molecular biology and cutting edge. And molecular biology, by the way, is like that's DNA studying, and that's like all the gene stuff that Nu Skin's doing. So that's what he was studying. He was studying exactly what they're doing now. So so when he came back with the thumbs up, that's when our group jumped in, you know, like full force. So with that, I'll have Rob come up, and like we said earlier, this is just meant to help your belief. It's not meant for anyone to think they need to even like talk about the science, and let alone, you know, really kind of go deep. It's not meant for that at all. It's really meant for you to have the confidence that what Nu Skin says and what we're doing is so profound that really, and you will see that no one can do this. This is just Nu Skin. They have a wall of patents, like a fortress around everything we do. I mean, that's what the legal department is really adept at. And so we're the only ones that can do this. We're the only ones that, you know, will be able to provide solutions going forward. So the next 10 years, they already have a pipeline. What that means is they have a plan for the next 10 years of what's happening every year. And and you'll see that really we actually have a 30-year or more advantage. So with that, I'll have Rob come up and.
Thank you, Christine. So I'm in an LLC called Arunaki LLC. You've heard some about us tonight. So it's comprised of Amanji, Christian, her husband, Rob Spindler, and my beautiful wife and me. And I have been extremely beyond impressed with the science, but really impressed with how they're taking science and helping people with it right away. You know, there's a lot of research that's critical to do, but can take years and years and years and years to actually get into a form where people benefit from it directly. So that was one of the biggest things that impressed me. The talk will be a little tiny bit different than the talk earlier because it's a work in progress. So thank you for staying this late. I know it's pretty late at night, but we'll get through.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go over basic genetics and epigenetics in a very simplified manner. My goal here is to give you some concept of what we're doing and the depth of brain power and money and time that's going into this. Not so that you talk about it with people, but so you know. And it really gives you a lot of confidence. We're noticing with our people that when they really know and believe in what this is, they go share it with people. And you don't need to have the answers, even if they're in disagreement, and just say, you need to try this. Just give it a month, you know. Or, this is for vitality I'm referring to. Scientific experiments to back up the statements I'm going to make here. The Agelop algorithm, which is really one of the keys here, is this algorithm, which I'll explain in the talk. But the way that only Nu Skin has a system that can literally be applied to any organ of our body, any tissue, any body system. You'll see that. Why this is so exclusive to Nu Skin. And then I'll do a little bit on LifePak Nano Vitality and a little bit on transformations too. Okay. So just to start off here, you know, I don't know why it does that. I'll figure that out, sorry. There must be a transition thing in that one slide. Okay, so DNA is the basic genetic material of life, okay? And it's a double helix, so this is a schematic of it, but you actually see there's two helices running, and they kind of run together like that. And it's inside the nucleus of the cell. You also find DNA in the mitochondria, which we'll look at those mitochondria later. They're kind of a hot topic right now. It's been thought till now that DNA controls everything. That your DNA, you get it, that's what determines who you are, and that's it. Well, that's actually only part of the story, and that's what I'm going to talk about. It's the alphabet of life. It is the genetic code, okay? It's the letters. The order of those letters carry the information to make protein. And protein is the nuts and bolts of your cells, okay? So I've been using an example, even if you had a car and that was a cell, protein would be everything. The body of the car, the engine, all the parts. All the reactions are catalyzed by enzymes, you know, so enzymes carry out, assist in the carrying out of all biochemical reactions. Those are all made out of proteins. And DNA carries the information to make those proteins. Okay? It's the blueprint. I'm going to keep using that word because DNA is the blueprint for the proteins of the cell. I put this in just to try to make it even more graphic. This would be the blueprint of a human brain. This would be the job of the DNA to hold the information to make the brain. Okay? And all of your cells, they look really different, but they have identical DNA. And this is, we're starting at cellular level and we'll work up to human level, okay? This is a red blood cell, so it doesn't have DNA anymore because it's mature, but it used to have DNA when it was younger. A platelet and a white blood cell. This is a nerve cell. You see how different they all look, but they're genetically identical. And that's because some genes are on in a nerve cell that are not on in a white blood cell, and vice versa. The choice of which genes are expressed, it's called gene expression or cellular expression, that is determining what these cells look like and what they do, what they biochemically do, what they structurally do. It's all determined by which genes are used. Although all the genetic material is the same in all the cells. So there's something that is above, epi means above the genetics. The epigenetics is the grammar of life. It's how the genes are expressed. Okay, that's a higher order level of control, if you will, or you have the genes, but then how you're using them to express life is epigenetics. So the example that I use is if I have a book, right, and it has the words and the sentences, and I give everyone in the room the book. That would be the DNA. That's the blueprint. The book is the hard copy. Everyone who reads the book is going to have a different experience. If you ask someone, they're going to have different things they like, different feelings that they had. That's more like epigenetics, how the book's interpreted. So blueprint's the same. You see that? It would be the same book for everyone, but totally different use of that book for everyone. That's more like epigenetics, and that's why we can do what we're going to do in UCM. So I'm going to use this example. Time magazine came out with an article 2010 called Why Your DNA Isn't Your Destiny. See, that word isn't is because they're learning a lot more. Scientists are learning a lot more about epigenetics. From the basic understandings to recently, it was thought that your DNA is your destiny. You get your genes from your parents, and that's it. That's your, you get what you get. So this scientist, Dr. Lars Byron, ran an experiment looking at a population that they had data on for generations. Okay? And they looked at, this was in, I think it's in Ireland. I have to review that to be sure, but the population would go through sometimes famines and sometimes gorging based on how their harvest was. They would either eat very little or they'd eat a lot through the winters mostly. this is the scientist, okay? And I'm going to use his family as an example. So that's him. That's his son. That's his grandson. They looked at when the boys were younger. So I'm not talking about their having children. These are just young boys, 12-year-old boys or something, okay? They looked at how the next generations were affected by how those boys ate. So when he is 12 years old, how he's eating, they're looking at the lifespan of his grandson. And what they found was, this man, when he's 12, goes through famine periods. His grandson can live up to 10 or 20 years longer. Whereas if he goes through a gorging period where they're overeating, 2 generations later, that grandson can die 10 to 20 years early. So there's something happening. There's some kind of a mark being made on the DNA that is being handed down for generations. And this is not just in this case. You know, there's other stories of famines where the mother, you know, in a prenatal period, the mother goes through famine and they have low birth weight children. Well, the grandchildren also have low birth weight, even if those mothers eat perfectly well while the child's in utero. And there's studies coming out now. I just read something today. They're looking at even like post-trauma, you know, PTSD. And survivors of an experience such as a Holocaust or something, their children are showing up more prone to PTSD. And the first thought was that because those parents are having troubles, then their kids, because they're raised in that environment, having trouble. But they're now looking more from a genetic standpoint, that there's actually epigenetic marks on the people going through the trauma that are being handed down. Because they're doing studies now in mice where they're seeing that. And that's pretty wild. I mean, and yet it isn't, and if you look at it just from a natural standpoint, that does make sense. But based on the common paradigm you hear in society, it's not obvious. And it's not obvious from strict Darwinism, where they would, in Darwinism, a mutation happens spontaneously. And if that happens, and if it's in the germline, it has to affect the sperm or the egg, then it's passed on. You know, and that's a whole nother talk, you know, but it came into my head. So. But we could do an evolution talk another day. I got a lot to say about that too. So the environmental factors, diet, stress, prenatal nutrition, these things are somehow imprinting the genes that are being passed on for generations. And some of the studies I've looked at, like when I was at UCSF, there's one of my professors there, she's like top geneticist in the world, and she studies these nematodes, these little worms, and they know every gene, and sometimes 20, 30, 40 generations they're finding. Because the lifespan's shorter, you can study more generations. Epigenetic marks are staying for that long. It's a big deal. This is a very big deal. So the cells have roughly 120,000 proteins, okay? And those are doing all the structures of the cell, the functions of the cell, the enzymes of the cell. So when they went to sequence the human genome, which you've heard about this, you know, a lot of times, the thinking was we got 120,000 proteins, there's going to be 120,000 genes to code for those proteins, okay? What they really found was only 25,000 genes. Which is a lot of genes, because later I'm going to tell you that's a lot of genes. It is a lot of genes, but it's not 120,000 genes. So something's happening where these genes are all, this number of genes is able to be made into that many proteins. So there's more going on than you just, there's a code and you read it and you make a protein. And there's many different ways that can happen when you study molecular biology, but my point is, there's a lot happening after the genes are read. And so, you know, it was 2003. I just put this in to show you the impact of it, because it really, a lot of age-lock depends on the fact that the human genome was sequenced. It cost $3 billion. It was done all around the world. It took it more than a decade, because I was in school, they were debating if they should even do it, you know. Gene expression is what it's called. That's how you